Welcome to R&R Live and Life. In this segment, Rick and I explore what is classed as the central base of Cape York and check out two very small towns. Last episode, we had left you as we arrived in Forsayth, where we will pick up this episode. Once we spend quite some time here, we will then make our way 70 kilometres to Einasleigh, situated at the confluence of the Einasleigh and Copperfield rivers. From there, we will then make our way back to Georgetown. What an interesting little community Forsayth turned out to be. Though Forsayth is only 40 kilometres south of Georgetown, to some it is in the middle of nowhere. Originally known as Finnegan's Camp, after the prospector who discovered gold nearby in 1871, within a year the settlement had become Charleston Township, and it continued to grow despite near desertion when its inhabitants rushed to the Palmer River Goldfield in 1874 and to the Hodgkinson Goldfield in 1876. After a slump in the mid-1880s, the township was again a flourishing centre by the mid-1890s, having 5 hotels, a school and a court of petty sessions. Part of the Etheridge Goldfield, this area was known as Poor Man's Goldfield, as a prospector did not need expensive equipment to search for gold. Nugget gold was literally found on the ground. Many of the towns within this goldfield rose and fell quickly. Strikes were short-lived, with always the promise of another fortune. Temporary corrugated iron buildings were pulled down and transported by wagon to the new instant town. By the late 1890s, a number of promising copper deposits were opened up in the Etheridge district at Charleston, Einasleigh and Ortona, leading to a rail link commencing in 1907 from Almaden on the Chillagoe to Mareeba rail line to Einasleigh and the Charleston area, which was completed in 1910. The Etheridge Railway terminated at a new settlement on the other side of the Delaney River. First known as New Charleston, it was renamed Forsayth. During that year, all the buildings in Charleston, including the police station and the school, which had previously been at Gilberton, were moved across the Delaney River to Forsayth. In 1914, the Chillagoe smelters were shut down, and the town's importance as an ore-loading facility and centre for miners and their families declined as mining activity in the area was scaled back. Forsayth remained a railhead for transport to the west, although plans in the 1930s to extend the railway to connect with the Normanton-Croydon Railway did not proceed. The Goldfields Hotel has been the only hotel in Forsayth since 1917, when the mining boom subsided and the smelters ceased to operate. Cattle grazing emerged as the major local industry following the war years, and the rail line was reconditioned in 1951 to become an important transport link to Cairns for livestock and freight. Cattlemen and drovers replaced miners and prospectors as the hotel's patrons. By the late 1980s, road trains had become the favoured mode of transport for livestock, and the rail line once again met hard times. The regular freight and passenger rail service from Cairns to Forsayth ended in 1995, following a decline in mineral traffic and the completion of improved road access to Forsayth. Surrounded by mountainous terrain consisting of granite and mineralised sedimentary rocks, this is pioneering country, a place where you can connect with the rich history, people, places and geological wonders of the vast outback countryside. Forsayth has a small permanent population of under 100 residents, and they certainly work hard to maintain the town and the fabulous attraction it offers. At the town's heart are the Goldfields Hotel and Finnegan's Rest. We found it more than just a tourist loop, especially the countryside. From Forsayth we continued on to Einasleigh through the iconic rugged outback featuring vibrant red dirt tracks, open dry savanna woodlands dotted with gum trees and distinct rocky escarpments. What a drive! The road was bitumen with lots of twists and turns, short sharp inclines followed by a descent into a creek crossing, offering a mixture of arid, rocky scenery and hidden waterholes, though we did not partake in any of the waterholes as we left them for the wildlife and livestock. It was an amazingly diverse and spectacular region. Observing the changes in landform and vegetation always provides an extra dimension to our journey, with the Newcastle Range, with its folded and rounded low hills of granite and sediments. The vegetation changes with soil types supporting lancewood patches on hard, shallow soils, red river gum and coolabah trees by the creek, and box species on the deeper red soils. On arriving in Einasleigh, we took a drive around this small town, checking out the Einasleigh station, the Memorial Hall, and the interesting sculptures in people's gardens. Einasleigh sits on the eastern edge of the Newcastle Range, on the banks of the Copperfield River, and is on the old Chillagoe to Forsayth railway. Once a copper mining town, Einasleigh is set at the foot of Red Rock Hill and the Caterpillar Range. The township of Einasleigh, originally named Copperfield, was laid out in 1900 by the mining warden on a new township reserve established near the Einasleigh Company's copper mine. Although the company had been formed only in the previous year, already 2 hotels, a store, a billiard room, and butcher and baker shops were being built, and funds were being collected for a school. The town briefly became the largest population centre in the Shire during construction of the Chillagoe Company's Etheridge Railway in the years 1907 to 1910. After the closure of the mine in the 1920s, however, the township almost disappeared and was saved from extinction only by its location on the railway. We had come to Einasleigh to view the Copperfield Gorge, one I had never heard about, but it was well worth seeing. The gorge itself is wide and long. Its basalt walls are visually striking, with patterns and shapes always changing as we explored its length. It is stunning, with its stark grey walls and small waterfalls. This quite young gorge has been scoured out on the doorstep of Einasleigh as a consequence of events triggered 260,000 years ago, far away to the south. At that time, huge lava flows were erupted from Barker's crater east of Blackbraes National Park, north of Hughenden, to flow down the valley to the Einasleigh River and fill its channel. At the present location of Einasleigh, the valley broadened, so the basalt spread out to form the flat plain now under the town. In some stretches of the river, the flow was obscured by sediments ranging from clay and sand to gravel and boulders. After being filled with basalt, the Einasleigh River had to cut a new channel around Einasleigh. It did so on the eastern edge of the basalt, where it abutted hills of resistant older rocks. However, the smaller Copperfield River was dammed up behind the basalt and had to cross it to join the channel of the Einasleigh River to the east. As that larger river had eroded its channel quickly to a lower level, the Copperfield River had to descend abruptly to join it. It did so in a small waterfall which has gradually retreated upstream to leave a small gorge. It was an amazing scene, and knowing how it was created is fascinating. Rick and I wandered the upper part of the gorge, following the river as it cascaded over little waterfalls on its way to drop into a large pool. There were small pools trapped in rock holes and sand piles in amongst the harder black rocks. Further downstream was a lower area with a wide stretch of sand. It is hard to get my head around just how much water flows through the gorge to inundate the hotel higher up, especially given the depth of the lower part of the gorge. The Einasleigh Hotel was constructed in 1909 when Einasleigh was named Copperfield for the river and the gorge. The Einasleigh copper deposit was found by Richard Daintree in 1866, one of the earliest mineral discoveries in North Queensland. It was initially too remote to develop and was abandoned and virtually forgotten after Daintree's death. The Chillagoe Company rediscovered the Einasleigh shaft when exploring the area and began developing it in 1900. A small blast furnace was erected for smelting in 1902, but until the opening of the Etheridge Railway in 1910, operations proved uneconomical because of the high transport cost. The mine closed when the Chillagoe smelters were shut down in 1914. Acquired by the Queensland Government in 1919 as part of the assets of the Chillagoe Company, it returned to full production the following year, supplying the reopened Chillagoe smelters. As the Einasleigh State Mine, it finally closed in 1922 as a result of depleted ore reserves and a post-war drop in the world copper price. As we had spent most of the day exploring this area, it was time to make our way back to the Gulf Development Road and back to Gidget in Georgetown. Just over Copperfield River Bridge, we took the turn-off to the Gregory Development Road. We crossed the Einasleigh River with a very rough rocky bottom and continued along the well-formed gravel road with several shallow creek crossings and washed-out gullies for roughly 50 kilometres through the Newcastle Ranges. We were literally following the eastern side of the Einasleigh River all the way to the GDR. About 20 kilometres north of Einasleigh, we passed Jardine Station Waterhole, a scenic rustic camping spot on a working cattle station. The lagoon was covered in water lilies, and I could only imagine the bird life that would frequent the area. There were many twists and turns, short sharp rises, steep descents into creeks, and some blind corners. The road joins the Gulf Development Road 61 kilometres from Georgetown and 31 kilometres from Mount Surprise. We crossed the rail line for the Savannah Lander, having seen the 1960s classic silver bullet rail motor on the southern side of the Einasleigh, as the bridge was yet to be repaired, a couple of grids on boundaries between paddocks, and numerous gullies and waterways, some with a small amount of water. The road is generally considered a scenic, well-graded but remote dirt road, but for Rick and I it was an enjoyable drive. We saw a few herds of cattle, all in good condition, an old watering point with rails and cement trough protected by a wooden fence around it, something I hadn't seen in years. It was an amazing section of road. However, I would not like to drive it in the wet season. Our day exploring had been one of the most enjoyable we have had, as there is nothing better than driving on a well-maintained gravel road, even with a few corrugations. Maybe we were just reliving our younger years, when most of our driving was on dirt or gravel roads, sometimes in good condition, while others not so. The country, the two small communities, and the Copperfield Gorge were incredible. I had heard that the country around Forsayth was good grazing country, but had not expected it to have been so hilly. How I wished we had a few of the bullocks we saw. They were in tip-top condition. The people of the Etheridge Shire are outnumbered by their cattle, and I suspect that cattle are equally outnumbered by termite mounds. There were two driving forces that drew people to the hot, desolate places of North Queensland: pastoral holdings and mining. The cattle industry in the Einasleigh Shire developed from its 1860s origin as a pioneer pasturing frontier into a key component of the region's agricultural economy, heavily influenced by the interplay between mining, when copper was first discovered in the region in the early 1860s, rail infrastructure, and environmental adaptation. Historically, the area was settled by pastoralists seeking sweet grass for cattle and sheep. Sheep have long since gone, as the short-lived venture with sheep was largely abandoned in the Einasleigh area along with much of the wider Gulf and North Queensland, around 1867, shortly after they were introduced. The environment was found to be too wet or unsuitable for sheep. Disease such as Gulf fever, issues with native vegetation, and the reliance on tallow and hides for profit proved to be uneconomic. The region is characterised by tropical savanna woodlands, providing fertile grazing land that supports both breeding and fattening operations, frequently trading and supplying stock to both live export and meatworks via connections to Charters Towers. The landscape is iconic Australian bush, truly beautiful outback scenery. Once back on the Gulf Development Road, I can't remember the road having so many sweeping bends or being so undulating between rises and watercourses, but I suppose over time memories do tend to fade. We crossed the high-level HL Bibb Loudon Bridge, often referred to simply as the Einasleigh River Bridge, located approximately 53 kilometres east of Georgetown. Officially opened in 2011, it was built to replace an old low-level structure that was designed for inundation that frequently flooded, often cutting off access to the Gulf region. The new high-set bridge was constructed to flood-proof the Gulf Country. The old bridge was flooded in every wet season, but in 2009 it was underwater for 40 days after the biggest flood on record. Closer to Georgetown, we crossed another nearby infrastructure, the Roff Creek Bridge, that in early 2024 faced issues when it suffered significant damage, causing major closures. The Gulf Development Road begins at an unnamed junction on the southern edge of the 40-mile Scrub National Park, 241 kilometres southwest of Cairns, and runs west before terminating at a junction with the Burke Development Road, 7 kilometres south of Normanton. It is the only sealed bitumen road linking these two regions. It is sealed for its full length, but as of 2018 there are many sections of the road which were only single-lane bitumen, with gravel shoulders requiring vehicles to move partially onto the shoulders, particularly 55 kilometres west of Georgetown and 20 kilometres west of Mount Surprise. The Gulf Development Road is designated Highway 1, but is not part of the National Highway Network. I hope you have enjoyed our trip to Forsayth and Einasleigh. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we make our way to the breathtaking natural wonder of the Cobbold Gorge for a couple of days. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Live in Life.